G'day IB psychologists. This video is to help you choose the best study for your IB psychology IA. Now, the best study is going to be, quite simply, the one that you like, you find interesting, you understand it, but most importantly, you can explain it using a background theory or model. And you'll see in my previous video, I provide some useful theories or models that are most commonly used in IB psychology IAs. And the theory or model is actually more important than the study. Having said that, theories and models aren't nearly as interesting as some of these studies I'm about to explain. So I want to explain the studies. I'll give you some possible theories or models that they're related to. And there's a link in the description to the blog post where these are explained in more detail. All right, let's get into it. The laundry study. This is one of my favorites. If students are struggling, they're not sure what to do. If anyone's a new teacher and they're looking for a nice, easy, simple study that is really hard to go wrong, this is brilliant. Bransford and Johnson, they found if you give the title of a passage to someone or if you give them some sort of context, like showing them a picture, before they hear an abstract reading, they're going to have a better memory of it. And this is relevant to schema theory. In the original studies, they measured comprehension and recall, choose only one dependent variable. And also remember, all IAs, it's best to simplify to 2 conditions, not 3 or more, as in this study and some others, unless, that is, you can use an ANOVA inferential statistics. Now, if you don't know what an ANOVA is, then I wouldn't go further than that. These are some studies. Now, word warning here, I actually haven't replicated these in my classrooms for IAs, and I haven't really seen them done in other IAs when I'm marking for the IB. So this is a bit of a wild card, but I think they're highly interesting and relevant, and I really want to see my students do them in the future, if they're interested, of course. But these are 2 studies you could choose from. And what they find is that smartphones reduce their working memory. This first study, Aharoni and Zion, they found getting notifications, text message notifications from WhatsApp while doing a working memory task reduced working memory capacity. Wardell found that even if the cell phone's turned off, just having it near you will reduce working memory. And this links to cognitive load theory, which you might not be familiar with. This is a theory about how the factors that influence our working memory when we're trying to learn are really important to consider. And so smartphones are a source of cognitive load. Now, there are lots of studies on nomophobia, not having your phone produces anxiety, or not being able to answer your phone when it rings producing anxiety. I thought to myself, hey, that would be cool for the IA, and then I remembered we're not allowed to do studies that induce anxiety. But I think these are highly relevant, and at the time of writing, it's not yet available, but hopefully it will be by the time you're watching this. Studying with your smartphone is a new unit I've just written for the HL Cognitive Extension, and as soon as it's ready, I'll put a link in the description. Right, note-taking, another really relevant study. Is it better to take notes on a laptop by typing or by hand? There are multiple possible theories that could explain why in this original study they found that handwriting was better for memory, especially of conceptual information, right, like reading between the lines, than typing. See the blog for a possible theory. My advice is choose the one that you understand and can explain these original results. And remember, in the IA, you have to explain the relevance of your aim. Now, that's mostly done by giving a real-life application of the results. However, this one provides you with a possibility to explain an additional relevance to this aim, because recently, Moorhead et al. Tried to replicate this, and they found contradictory findings. So there's a chance there for you to include that in your introduction as well. Also, that's a chance there if your experiment doesn't work, quote unquote, so if you get opposite results to the expected, or if you get the results that cannot be explained by your theory, this failed replication might provide some things for you to discuss in the evaluation. Anchoring effect, Kahneman and Tversky, some classic studies here. There are different types, like telling someone Gandhi's age and then answering a question, and does the difference in age that you tell them affect their judgment? Or there's one where it's simply asking people to multiply 1 times 2 times 3 up to 8, or you begin with 8 times 7 times 6 and seeing which one produces the biggest guess. And this is linked to the dual processing model. So the anchor effect here, there's a couple of versions. Again, all these studies and more details are linked in the blog post, which is in the description. Now, just a word of warning, anytime you're using the dual processing model, it's been my experience that describing the model is really straightforward because it's system 1, system 2 processing, and it's just the adjectives that describe those 2 systems. That's one thing you have to do for the introduction to get full marks. However, you also need to use the model to link it to the investigation, which in my, I think the best way to do that is to use the model to explain the results. Using the dual processing model can be used to explain the anchoring effect, but it is rather difficult. So make sure you can do that before you go ahead and choose that study. The effort heuristic, this was one that some of my students did successfully this year. And this is if you tell someone, let's say for example, I'll use a visual here, a painting, and if you said this took 2 days to produce, then people generally rate it as being better or worth more money than if you told them it took 2 hours. So people use the perceived effort it took to do something as a heuristic, as a shortcut for making a judgment on something's worth. And this is linked to System 1 and System 2 processing in the dual processing model. Again, many of these studies can be used for your exam, so that might influence which one you choose. My recommendation isn't to go for the theory or model or the study that you understand the best perhaps, because it might be better to choose one that you struggle with. Like if you're struggling with the working memory model, maybe it'd be great to do a study for the IA, because that will help you understand that model better when it comes to the exams. Turn that weakness into a strength. That's just one, I don't know. Up to you, right? Of course, these are all your decisions and working with your teacher, which ones you go for. Font and memory, they found that a harder to read font improved the memory. And there's two possible theories here, I think. Students of mine this year one student wrote a very good explanation of the disfluency theory and how this can explain it, or the levels of processing might also be relevant here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a really good one to explain the relevance. It's easy to explain the relevance of the aim because we can see how this might have applications in education in the classroom. So when you're explaining the relevance of the aim of the study, of your investigation, I should say, give a real-life application and then give an example or two. Now remember, anything here to do with memory is, of course, you're a student, you're in school, the purpose of education is to learn, right, to improve memory. So anything about memory is going to be relevant to teaching and learning. So that's one way you can explain the relevance of the aim. Right, the self-reference effect. Now I cannot remember in the last 12 years I've been teaching IB psychology if I've had a student do this. I don't think so. But I have seen it done successfully in other people's IAs. What they find is that if you connect the information to yourself in some way, right, it's self-reference, so you make meaning, does it apply to you, make some sort of connection to your own person, this improves your memory. So this is to do with levels of processing. It's almost another type of level of processing along with structural, phonological, and semantic. We have self-referent processing. Could also be relevant to schema theory, so either of those. Now, that being said, I would always recommend choosing one theory or model to base your IA investigation on. However, if you need to use two, then you can use two. Just a reminder that things like the self-reference effect, the effect itself, does not constitute a theory or model since this year, May 2021. So, at the time of recording this, the policy is that it must be a theory or model per se. Now, that being said, this fake it till you make it, I had students a couple of years ago do a fantastic IA on this, and one student scored a 19 or a 20 out of 22, almost got top marks, and they linked this to the facial feedback hypothesis. Now, will this count as a theory or model? Of the 200 IAs I just marked this year, none of these appeared as, no, I didn't mark any that did this, so I'm not 100% sure, right? So that's just a word of warning about this one. However, I have had students do it successfully in the past. What does it mean? It means people who imitate a smile will have an improvement in their mood. And we can measure the mood using the PANAS scale, the positive and negative affect schedule. It's a questionnaire designed to measure your positive and negative affect, or your positive and negative emotions. And so I would recommend choosing either how the faking the smile improves the positive mood or reduces negative mood, or I would focus on the positive or negative. Okay, don't do both. So this one here, a little bit tricky if you get caught up in the dependent variables. Short-term memory, Peterson and Peterson, a classic. It's a great one to use for the SAQs on the multi-store model. It's relevant. What they found is that if you prevent rehearsing information, then information will only last up to about 18 seconds, 20 seconds, about that in the short-term memory. And so what I would suggest, in the original study, they had multiple conditions, right? A delay of 0, 3, 6, 12, 18 seconds. Choose only two. two conditions. So most students would do 0 seconds and 18-second delay. And I would recommend doing multiple trials each condition. So a trigram is a meaningless consonant, right? I was about to say KFC, but that's not meaningless because that's a delicious hamburger restaurant. You have things like PMT, right? Or BRS, just 3 consonants strung together. So I wouldn't just do one trigram for 0 seconds and one for 18 seconds, but maybe do 5 each person at 0 seconds and 5 each at 18 seconds, right? So now you're going to have data that's at least ordinal. You're going to avoid having nominal data, which can be a little bit trickier later. All these tips and explanations are in the blog post linked below as well. Again, I had some students do an excellent color and context IA this year, looking at the effects of colors on memory. And in the original study here that they replicated, they found that a red background improved memory, and this is can be explained using the color and context theory. And a good one for this is that even if the study doesn't work, meaning you get the opposite results, there's plenty here to discuss, and there's many possible alternative explanations for why, for example, red might reduce memory. And so I've had students do very good IAs on this, and that's one tricky thing with in the evaluation. You have to discuss the theory or model in relation to your results, and so that can be difficult, but this allows some good discussion fodder for the evaluation. But if you're only just starting out in the process, then I wouldn't worry about that just yet. Alright, so they are some of the ones that I would recommend the most, but of course that's not an exhaustive list. They're not all of them. Do check out the blog, and there are others that you could do, but I think yeah, that's a good list. Now, some honorable mentions, you might look at music and cognition. So this has been classically called the Mozart effect, although it's debatable if it is an effect. Someone found a Schubert effect. Someone also found a Stephen King effect. And there are multiple possible theories that could explain this. Word length effect, this is related to Miller's hypothesis of how much information can we keep in our minds. It's also linked to the working memory model about it's easier to remember longer words or shorter words, basically. Google and memory. Now, this is an honorable mention. This is a great one to do, but I didn't put it in the main studies here because transactive memory theory, again, borderline if that would be accepted, but I think it should be. Google and memory is the idea if people think that their information is going to be stored later, accessed later, then they won't remember it as well. And that's why it's been called the Google effect. Fake it till you make it. I actually think I put that in the body, didn't I? Now, here are some studies that I would be hesitant to choose, and I will make a separate video where I explain why. Beginning with the Stroop effect, Glanzer and Kunitz, Loftus and Palmer, Brewer and Trans, and Anderson and Pichet. So if you are doing these studies, please consult carefully with your teacher. And for Glanzer and Kunitz and Loftus and Palmer, these can be done, but there are some things to be careful of. And Loftus and Palmer used to be by far the most popular IA. Even in this new curriculum 2 years ago, it was, I would say, maybe 1 out of 4, 25%, if not more of them were Loftus and Palmer. But in the recent examining season, there were not as many Loftus and Palmers. It's become far less common and popular, and I think that is because of the difficulty with linking this to the theory or model. And so other studies have become far more common. I would say possibly things like the anchoring effect and the dual processing model studies have become much more common. So these are some that I would be wary of choosing. Glanzer and Kunitz, the irony with Glanzer and Kunitz here is it can be done really well, and in some ways it's perfect for the IA, but it's just many students fall into some easy pitfalls. So if you want to do Glanzer and Kunitz, and it is great for the multi-store model and for the exams as well, then check out my other video that I explain tips with this one, and also for Loftus and Palmer. These other three, I'll make another video where I explain why I think you should be careful of choosing them. Alright, that is it. Good luck. Link in the description to the IB Psychology ebook for the internal assessment. I don't expect students to buy this, but if you are a student and you think it might be helpful, maybe forward it to your teacher and see if they'd be interested. Maybe your school can purchase it, or the teacher support pack there has all the materials you need. There should be a link in the description to subscribe to our blog, so anytime I post a new blog, you will get an update as well. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get updates, of course, every time I post a new video. All right, I hope that was helpful. Please leave a comment in the description. I would also love to hear how your IA went after you finished it, if you chose one of these studies, and if you've got tips, if you did one of these studies and you've got tips for students for the future, that would be a great thing to add to the comments, right? We're all in this together so we can help each other out. Alrighty, good luck.